would polish these floors, clean the place every day. His name was Ed Hoffmeister. And they both lived down near Portage, beyond Portage down there, locals. So it's kind of interesting to come back after all these years and see all the changes, because it's really not the same. I have a number of sources to talk about this past. And Steve here has yet another pictures which I'd have given anything to have been able to fold into this, or fold this into his talk, and he can carry on.
Next year.
You know, whatever it is. Anyway, we'll start. A lot of the materials comes from this book, published in the early 80s. It's got a lot of photographs and other materials about the history of radio and Puget Sound. It's, I'd like to give him credit because some of these pictures come from there. But my father grew up, he was born in Salmon, BC. They moved to White Salmon, Washington. Sometime in the 20s, the original hand rig. You know, basic radio stuff, as he did it at the time. I know he had an open wire plate voltage circuit. He got his hand across, he got blood poisoning, and the doctors wanted to cut his arm off. My grandmother wouldn't let him do that, just as well. He could have died, but he didn't. And he survived to go on. He was a early victim of technology. This is the feed for the networks from the East Coast and up and down the West Coast. It's hard to read this, but this is the Los Angeles. It has a separate feed coming in, and I don't have the code for what these lines mean. Probably different quality, you know, 4 kilohertz line or 5. Usually it was around telephone quality, or a little 7.5 kilohertz line was pretty expensive in those days. So radio sounded the way it did if you're listening to the network, because it was coming in on phone lines. This is from the East Coast to Salt Lake, Portland, and then Seattle, and then it fed San Francisco, and then LA. It's just sort of a little artifact of history that's interesting to know about. And this is the original studio type of situation that they had. Interesting, it looks like these are transcription type recordings. There's the tone arm and the microphone, an early console, collection of records and all that. But what I remember is we had to climb up and work on the antenna on the top of the building back when KXA was operating it. And you had to climb up a ladder to get into this studio. Just another one of my dad's pictures of early studio operations of interesting cartridge. Probably had a steel needle in it, 3 mil, 78 or 33 1/3. This is the original antenna that became KXA. They had the longest running SDA in radio history because they had moved to a tower on the banks of the waterway around Harbor Island, and the military was using the area. The natural decay of the shoreline caused the tower to start to lean, so they had to go back to using this about the time of World War II, and they were on it up through the 50s and 60s until, you know, 770s now, just across the field here. But the actual antenna, you can't see it in this depiction, but the antenna is a vertical, the cage of wires that comes up. This is top loading, this little section. That's the antenna. The rest of this is just support. The towers don't enter into it. Kind of an interesting thing in that they did not really consider the you know, you've got a passive 3-tower DA here driving the middle element, but they didn't worry about that because they couldn't figure it out, I guess. I mean, nobody, it wasn't that important. Chad Huntley doing an opera broadcast using recordings from that studio, the KIRO, and then Pacific Coast Biscuit Company. That's where the KPCB, the previous call letters for KIRO, came from. And Saul Haas bought it. I could have brought a tape that Warren Stone made about the history of KIRO. It's about 20 minutes long. It's somewhat inflammatory. I didn't have the time because I've been in the process of moving and been doing a lot of things. That would be very interesting to sit around and listen to how this station really got started in the 30s and 40s and the deals that were made. And I have that tape. I even got it turned into a CD. Warren Stone, who was the first program director, one of the first. Toby Quilliam was the assistant manager, but Warren Stone was the manager at KIRO. And he sat down with Bill Reuter, who was a transmitter engineer after my dad left, out here. And he lived over, further down Maury Island. And Lawrence Stone came over in, 70s or in the 80s and did this long story of the whole thing. It was sort of, meant for some people and not others, whatever. But I think it should be, when I get my act more together, one of these times, in one of these meetings, I'll play that. And it's really interesting about the history of KIRO, and mainly Saul Haas, and all of the things that happened at that time, at the very beginning of this radio station. And a lot of you got to know John Dubuque.
Really?
And he used to work there when it was KXA, really bored. He got a record queued up about Ready to Let It Go. But, I knew him mainly as a transmitter guy. And he worked for many local AM and FM stations around here. The early picture of the owner and originator, Saul Haas of KIRO, and my dad back in the day.
Wow.
I think they were probably in New York or someplace like that. I've got a whole pile of these family pictures.
Wow.
And this talk is based on a talk I gave some years back that I've augmented and added stuff to. He left for a while and got involved with putting King AM down the block here, the 3-tower directional on the air. But then, after working for the folks at King, he decided to go back and work for KIRO again. And there he is, and this is, a friend of mine sent me this. And these are some of the original people who appear in many pictures about the beginning of KIRO. That's Jim Updegrove. He was a studio engineer when they had the studios at the basement of the Cobb building. That's Lawrence Stone. That's Carol Foster, who was one of the head engineers. And that's Maury Ryder, who did sports programs, did a lot of fishing and hunting, and he had a regular program all the time on about hiking and the Pacific Northwest nature things. My dad, and then Saul Haas.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Now the beginning of this station, it was a Western Electric, the telephone company. It was a Doherty Western Electric that got shipped up here from Salt Lake City, 50 kilowatt, the first high power station in the Northwest. The field engineer was Frank McIntosh, who did these amplifiers and lives in the annals of high fidelity fame because it had the best quality of anything anybody had ever done with an audio amplifier. And he made some pretty good FM tuners, etc. And preamps. His preamps had all the an ability to get all the equalizations for all the recordings that were made. You could just adjust switches and knobs and get any curve that had done, and there were dozens of them at the time. And you could duplicate them all to get proper balance in your recordings, for LPs and for 78s. And that was, I just threw that in as sort of as a reminder to who McIntosh was. That's his logo on there. And I have one of these, it's my amplifier, I still use this stuff. This is the diagram for the antenna feed system originally in 1941 for this antenna. Now, this is set up to show the non-D. It's very confusing, but you come in from the transmitter here, you go up here through a contactor, and they don't use this stuff at all. You come down here, in here, and you feed this tower, and that's it. That's the non-directional feed. That's all there is. This is the isolation coil for the sample loop up the tower. All they do is match the reactance of the tower impedance. So you end up with a resistance hung across this 65 ohm line, and it just comes back in here right into the transmitter. And they got to have something in series to get rid of the reactance for that to have a proper load for the transmitter. But that's what they did. No parallel elements. And I analyzed this. It's quite a job. I only had a couple days to do it. I want to do maybe write up a paper and do the whole DA. Because the way the directional antenna system works, and I'm going to go into the simplified, I gave this to Ben Dawson, he simplified. Looks like this. You got one tower in the directional mode. It's got this stuff here, which does the power division for the directional antenna, and they feed the tower out here, the northwest tower, through the line, right in series. Nothing across it at all. And then for the southeast tower, you come over here. You cancel out the reactance coming off of the transmission line. This is the transmission lines. Right into the tower. It's a really interesting setup. But what I did was I did an analysis using a moment method program modeling these networks and the transmission line and the tower. The big impact on what the load of the tower is going to be is that base insulator. It's a capacitance. These are very high impedance towers. When this tower was working non-directional, its resistance is 490 ohms. They got rid of the reactance and put 490 ohms across the end of the transmission line. This were about 7 to 1. The voltage of 50, you're putting all 50 kilowatts into that. And this is confusing because this isn't being used. In the non-D mode, what they did is this is tied right into the transmitter. None of this circuitry is in here. All you've got is a connection from the transmitter to the transmission line, these two elements in the tower for non-D. That's what you got. 490 ohms out here. And they canceled the reactance. And if this line was what I think it is, well, the other thing I need to tell you is that the operating impedance at the common point here, where the transmitter drives, because these lines are 65 ohms, you want to keep everything at 65 ohms. And if you don't match this line, feeding this tower with this one floating, well, you know, feeding this tower with the southeast tower floating, and you transform that impedance after getting rid of the reactance through here, you get 65 ohms back there. If you've got a 160-degree line. I just use a Smith chart and then a couple of calculations to determine that. And you can match that. So what is the response of this antenna system, non-D, in the daytime, most of the time, 50 kilowatts into that one tower? What does it look like? Well, in summary, and I've got all the paper, someone wants to talk about the details, I got them all here, but I thought maybe we just glide through it. Across a 15 kilohertz audio spectrum that's within a dB, which for 1940 is pretty good. Yeah. I don't know any speakers that they had then that would perform then. And this Doherty will go down just about to DC in terms of low end response. You know, it's very low. Not, you know, Dawson used to talk about running the 1150 antenna and the Doherty transmitter he had a 5 kilowatt Doherty. He said they had to put a filter on the microphone because they'd give you a gust of wind. There'd be this very low subsonic boom, take the transmitter off the air. Yeah. It would attempt to transmit these very low frequencies. And how the transmitter did at the upper end, I do not know. But I think it's pretty interesting that they had an antenna system that would put out, you know, in 1940, such a wideband operation.
Hey Jim, the transmission lines, weren't those made out of copper water pipe that was available? It wasn't commercially available transmission line
Most
manufacturers.
transmission lines, when they started out, were irrigation pipes.
Right.
And that's why they had 3/8 inch long, because they used them agriculturally. And then they just put the center conductor with insulators in them. And I think this one was pressurized because
Yeah.
if you put 50 kilowatts through one of those things, and it's not matched, the Viswire is 7-to-1, your voltage is going to be at least 7 kilowatts. I mean 7 kilovolts.
Right.
And they didn't use any processing. So the peak voltage with 100% modulation was about 1.5 times roughly. So you're getting 10 kilovolts on a line 3/8 that was pressurized. Maybe it'll take 20, and if you had silver hexafluoride, maybe 25 kilovolts. So they're running it pretty close to the edge. And these high power installations used to put DC on the line, so if they got an arc over, they get a DC current and it would warn them what was going on. And these things were loaded with resistors in that previous diagram I showed. I don't know fully what's going on. I don't have all the paperwork. I'm just surmising this. But
The 65 ohms though only happened because of the dimensions of the
that
water
they had,
pipe that they had.
and
at
the center
time.
conductor, the inner
Right.
radius and the outer radius. That's it.
Right.
That's how it happened.
They couldn't get to 50, they had to take the 65.
Well, you didn't need. You could use. You know, what the hell?
Yeah.
50.
whatever.
Nothing magic about 50. We all use it now, but you don't have to.
Right.
Anyway, that's an interesting little story, and I'm still pursuing it. And I'm going to spend more time trying to figure it out. This is a picture of where they all went when they were putting this thing together. Frank McIntosh and my dad used to hike up to Twin Lakes, which is near Monte Cristo. This is Columbia Peak. And when you camp out, this is a ridge in between. This is the upper lake, and then there's a lower lake. And to get here, you've got to hike down from up here. You hike about 9 miles up, multi-thousand feet. And then you got to go down 600-800 feet to get down to the lake. Old McIntosh didn't want to hike around the edge, so he got down here and he hiked down somewhere over in here, and he made himself a raft and he floated himself across because he'd had enough. He didn't want to hike anymore. And this is what it looks like from the trail looking down. The lake you saw is this one, and they usually camp out in this little ridge in between the lakes. This is the lower lake. And it's just, nowadays they go in from Monte Cristo. It's about a 4-mile hike. But in the old days they went in from Mineral City, from Highway 2. It was quite a slog. I've never done that route. I'd like to go find it sometime. But you used to be able to drive all the way into Monte Cristo. In fact, you could stay there. We stayed there overnight at a little place at Monte Cristo and then hike up there. So there they are hiking in on the trail with pack boards, stuff just strapped on the pack boards. That's McIntosh and that's my dad. And there he is. He was just pissed off. He found, I don't know where he found that, but he paddled across the lake on this driftwood thing because he wasn't going to hike around the edge. And there they are camped out. This has got to be a different trip. You notice he's wearing a white shirt and a tie in the middle of this. So don't ask me. I don't know what that means. And when they camp out, when I started hiking, we did the same thing. My dad started out very young. Pack boards, no tents. You carry a canvas tarp and blankets, and you cut boughs off the trees to sleep on. And you slept on blankets, no sleeping bags, no stoves. Everything was cooking on an open fire. And there's the lean-to made from a backpack, just a tarp, canvas tarp. And it's all snowy in this particular trip. Early pictures of where we are now. This is the house that I grew up in, and it's all had wild boar and not wild boar, but pigs and cows and chickens and a lot of agriculture. My dad was in agriculture also. And this is a little garage where he rebuilt his Packard during World War II because he couldn't get anything done with it. And that's Bud Ray. This is the house that we lived in during the war. Bud Ray was an engineer here. He went on to Continental, and he was instrumental in inventing an antenna called the Paran antenna. He was one of the developers of it.
Wow.
In later years. And This is probably on the back of my dad's Packard, as a matter of fact. Those are prime collection of gooey ducks.
The brand antenna of the Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there they are. That's Frank and my dad, and that's me. Building this array. And this was the day, this is just historic stuff. 1940 when they opened the Narrows Bridge. Big ceremony, first bridges to go.
Galloping dirt.
Didn't last too long, the first windstorm. And there's the transmitter out here. Had a cutting lathe to make recordings. No tapes, no cassettes, instantaneous recordings. And there's Bill Reuter as they're putting the thing together. That's the tower that they were. It's got an interesting, the base pylon is here, and then up above this big insulator to isolate the tower. And it was quite an installation. There's a, you can see the ground system. You can see the house here. Then there was a neighbor's house over here where a guy named Jensen lived, one of the engineers who worked on the station. Maybe I'm looking at this backwards. I do believe I am, because that's water out there. This has to be looking west this way. This is the northwest tower. That is not the house. That would have to be...
That's an old store. That was a record.
When you look up north, you used to walk up there. I used to come out here and paint the fence in the summertime. There was an old guy who ran it, even in the 50s, but I'd go and buy cigarettes and stuff there. And it's long gone now, and the Shell station ended up being, it was up here.
Yeah, you're right in there.
And that's still there, the same name,
Yeah.
the same towing company, they were there then. So this is the northwest tower, and the transmitter building that we're in has to be out here somewhere.
Yeah, it would be over here.
Yeah. Well, it would be in the picture though,
Awesome.
because that tower is a little bit west of us. So if you draw a line north, you've got to be down here somewhere. And there it is. It's just a picture from even. You notice they had a full-time guy who trimmed all these stuff, kept all this up outside. That was Ed Hoffmeister. Then they had an emergency communication antenna in case the phone line went out up here. And when they started out on the northwest tower, they had an FM antenna. And they used to come in here and sign it off at midnight. In that office, they had this archy old record player from, must have been the 30s, black and white. I mean, just a black machine with a bare bones motor and on a stand. It was the darndest thing you ever saw. I think it had a steel needle in it, and they just wore this instantaneous recording of the sign-off. It was really bad shape. They put that thing on every night at midnight. That was part of your duties. You went in and played that, turned off the FM, and that was that. I don't think there was much FM activity in the 40s and 50s, but there you have it. And that's the back room right back there. These are the output tubes for this. And if you walk back that way, you see that. You can see it's. But Hoffmeister would come in and he'd polish this floor every day. It was a big deal. And Ed Orlando, and they both lived, down the beach here a bit. And they'd come in, and it's a full-time job. It was the big deal. There was no television. And television became the ceremonial deal. And, in the fullness of time, AM broadcast has shifted such that a 50 kilowatt is not a big deal. Wally's 880 is in a trailer out in the swamp. And I think TV's going the same way. They're moving out of their fancy digs and going down to cutting costs and de minimis and no more ceremony. This is the edge of the transmitter, I believe, right here. And this desk, which he has right there, was swapped around and it was back that way a little bit, right when you walked in. You can see the floor was a different kind of pattern. You'll notice how shiny that sucker is.
I think those were asbestos tiles.
The what?
I think those were asbestos tiles.
Yeah.
Asbestos
Yeah.
tiles.
Can't beat it. Asbestos, right? But it was quite a transmitter. It was walk in, the power supply was back in here. You could see the mercury vapor glowing at night. And they were big vacuum tubes, you know, that stood up quite a ways. And the finals are off in here. And, you know, walk in, the whole thing. And the emergency generator was back there. Water cooled, and we go down the stairs off to the right, and there was a still, because the water is very brackish out here. And you're trying to, yeah, you see that? That's that.
The two bright equipment racks on the far right are the original racks back in the room there. Those are original.
Are they?
Yeah.
Cool. Anyway, this is a skylight, and that's what that is. Close up of that control. Yeah. Well, you gotta have the ashtray.
Yeah.
It's required. If you didn't smoke, you were an oddball back then. Everybody gets lung cancer, don't they? Right. And a lot of the measurements were done when this was put in. They had to go out on the boat and do measurements across the salt water. And it isn't like the easy pickup carry around field sets we have now. It was a loop antenna with all sorts of factors to put in. You look at the measurements charts from the time, and there's all sorts of calculation you have to do in order to reduce it down to an actual field strength in millivolts per meter. Checking a monitor point. A federal radio field set on a tripod and an assistant up here in the hill off. The big one was toward the East Coast station they were protecting at the time, so they had to check the signal. You know, they'd have to switch over during the day to the nighttime DA and go out and check them. This is the opening ceremonies, and that's you know, it's hard to tell, but I guess that's more a writer.
It is.
This is the day that they opened up the operation out here. He used to do field and fishing and hunting reports, and he was an inveterate backpacker. I remember going off hiking into lakes, often lakes that didn't have a trail. They have trails now, but they didn't then. They were just bushwhacking into these lakes up on toward Monte Cristo there, the Loop Highway. It was amazing. Obviously staged picture looking at the vacuum tube. And it's interesting that these are the filament leads up here at the top. This is the plate connection down here. Water came in here to cool the thing down. The triode, the grid down here. Grid, plate, the cathode, center tap filament to drive the filaments as a cathode. During World War II, they had military protection because it was a big civil defense station, because it was the first high-power radio station in the area. And I don't know if there's apocryphal or not, but one of these guys shot a hole in the roof by mistake. So those weapons were armed.
Wow.
These are the early people at the radio station that I remember as a kid. I used to come up here, and in the back room over there, they would have a shortwave radio, and you could hear Hitler. It scared the hell out. I used to have dreams there'd be a lightning storm, and I was sure we were being bombed. It was a scary time, and and the Japanese hordes were about to come sweeping in up the beach from the. Everybody had their paranoid delusions about everything. That practically, some of these things had no chance of ever really happening, because the foe was never quite up to the. They caused a lot of harm, but they could never have a chance of doing what they wanted to do. So I remember these people very well, and Sam Noreen was the other one. Sam Noreen's wife used to run a loft down in the public market called Spindrifters. And she, when we moved out here in the 80s, she was still around and gave me a bunch of materials about KIRO. They used to also broadcast the races for the KIRO, for the UW crew, and I have some photos of that.
Now this is before houses were on the Mountain Lake Cut, or is this
Yeah, I couldn't really tell you for sure where the hell this is. I do not know.
Pre-Seafair.
Yeah.